Rising from the grassroots of this city, a revolution is happening. Birmingham Food Revolution. By the people, for the people. So thank you for joining us for this very special recording to celebrate the final creative dinner in series 1. So the creative dinners are part of a collaboration project with UCB School of Food. The creative dinner is going to be taking place on the 11th of December 2023, and as with all the creative dinners, they'll focus on an element of the Birmingham food system strategy. And this dinner is focusing on the 3 key principles of collaborate, empower and equalise. And we are set for an exceptional, thought-provoking menu and discussion. And we're very fortunate to have a very special speaker who's going to be setting the tone today and be sharing some more information. But yeah, the creative dinners are about exploring our food system. And this particular one is around exploring our food system from the point of view of migration, colonialism, the role of cultures from around the world that have created Birmingham into this place of a city of 1,000 cuisines. But to focus on why we're here today and our speaker, so our speaker for this very special video is Dr Diya Gupta, who is a lecturer in public history from City University of London. Dr Gupta is a literary and cultural historian with a wealth of knowledge and an unwavering passion for understanding the effects of the past on our present and how we can learn to create a better future. She's written and shared knowledge on platforms such as BBC History Magazine and the podcast as well. Do check that out. It's very, very interesting. The Guardian and so many other platforms as well. And Dr Gupta is also currently exploring the 1943 Bengal famine, which I don't want to go into too much detail. I know you're probably far better talking about this. So yeah, welcome to Dr Diya Gupta.
Thank you so much, Bradley, for that introduction. And hello, everybody. I'm really delighted to be speaking to you today about my research into food and famine, and particularly what that might mean for us today. So as Bradley mentioned, I'm a literary and cultural historian. I started off my research working on India and the Second World War. It's a subject I felt quite strongly about, because I thought that colonial experiences of something like the Second World War weren't really looked into in quite the same way as, say, the white European experience. And this kind of drew me to the archives and to working in the UK and in India in uncovering this history. And my book on this, India in the Second World War, An Emotional History, was published this year, which was quite exciting, and do check it out. And really kind of working on the Second World War led me in strange ways to thinking more deeply about food and what the lack of food might mean. And this is because when I started studying Indian involvement in the Second World War, I realized I couldn't really do it without looking also at the 1943 Bengal Famine, which was a direct product of the Second World War, and also to consider what the meanings of food in society might be, in forming cultural ties, in creating emotional bonds. I mean, think of yourselves right now. You're either going to sit down to have this incredible dinner, or you're already sat there, and it's brought you all together at one table to share food with one another. And that has a very kind of special and deep significance. So if we don't have that in society, what does that do for us? So a little bit of background perhaps on the Bengal famine might be useful here. So as I said, it was a product of the Second World War in India. It was a product of colonial policies of unchecked hoarding. So people really kind of hoarded their rice stocks, and sky-high inflation. So ordinary people were being priced out of being able to buy food. At the same time, rice stocks were being shipped out of India to meet the needs of Allied troops for the war effort. But equally, rice stocks within India were being destroyed along with their means of transportation by British colonial authorities, because there was this great fear of Japanese invasion of India in like 1942-43, because Japan had come so close to the borders of India in this war. And part of the reasoning behind destroying these stocks and their means of transportation was to prevent the Japanese from accessing these food supplies were they to invade India. So you see, all these conditions led to this terrible situation in which Bengal, which for those of us who don't know, is in the east of India and forms today both part of the countries of India as well as the country of Bangladesh. And Bengal was just left to starve. The irony is that Bengal was and still is a lush, fertile, and agriculturally abundant land. And yet over 3 million people died there because of lack of food for all the reasons I've outlined. And also because they succumbed to the associated diseases of cholera and dysentery and malnutrition. So things that can affect you if you don't eat the right food. But this is just the tip of the iceberg for me as a researcher, because I got really interested in what happens to societies and to communities when food is taken away from them in terms of their culture, in terms of how they respond emotionally to one another. So think, of a very kind of basic, fundamental social relationship, for example. Think of a mother or father's nurturing relationship with their baby. And this is formed right from the start through food, in providing the baby with breast milk or formula milk. I mean, I'm a new mum myself. I have a 14-month-old baby daughter. And I spend a lot of time thinking how much of our relationship is being cemented through food. And so going back to the famine, I'm interested as a researcher in the experiences of those who witnessed famine, who lived through this terrible time, and the ways in which they might have expressed their feelings. So this could be through art. Artists in the 1940s in Bengal really responded to the famine because there was this urgency to document this calamity that they were seeing happening in front of them. But equally through forms of writing, letters exchanged between people that kind of provide testaments to what they were seeing, and through literary work. So through novels, through poetry, through philosophical essays. 2023 is quite a significant year for the Bengal famine because it actually marks the 80th year since this famine took place. And I'm equally interested not just in the famine as the historical past, but how we remember this famine today and what we make of some of these connections we form with each other through food. How does it resonate, for example, with crises in our own times? Think, for example, of the blockade in Gaza. Think of the situation in Yemen at the minute. And think too, closer home, of the rising cost of living crisis in the UK, the use of food banks, some of the choices the most vulnerable in our societies are making between heating and feeding their child. So I think I'll leave you today with some more food for thought, if you'll pardon the expression. When you sit back and close your eyes, what's the first type of food that comes into your mind? What's the first thing you associate as something you'd really like to eat? It could be something from your childhood, something from your adulthood, just something that immediately comes to mind. What emotions do you associate with this type of food? I'll leave you to think about that.
It was a nice kind of eye-opener for everybody, and then they can almost kind of start that conversation around the table, but go away and learn more as well. I think you excited because the stuff I didn't know as well, which was interesting.
Oh, that's good. Well, Bradley, considering we've spoken before, that's good.
Yeah, I mean, about the Japanese during World War II, like, I honestly hadn't thought about that angle, and that constant fear as well, which often led people to do silly things like burn crops rather than so that's
absolutely. I mean, I think okay, the Bengal famine becomes easily, I think, in the UK a bit of a blame game thing. So it becomes like, is Churchill responsible or is he not responsible? And frankly, I just find that whole question boring. I really want to explore the textures of it, the textures of famine, of living through it, of writing about it. And even colonial policies which seem kind of, unjustified and inexcusable now, there were certain reasons why they were doing things, even if we still think it's inexcusable. They were thinking if the Japanese come, they're going to access these rice stocks. So instead of prioritizing people's lives, they said, let's destroy those rice stocks. So it's like, war priorities. But you have to kind of understand the colonial mentality behind these decisions to really kind of get to why they were being done, I think. So yeah, the Japanese being on the doorstep of India, I think, was a really big reason why there was famine.
Okay. I mean, it's so interesting, particularly like you kind of mentioned, in today's current climate with the kind of conflicts that are happening, and particularly what we've seen recently in Ukraine and the crop issues that then we went and seen around the world because of them responses. It's interesting that we seem to have not learned from the mistakes of the past.
I know. I think part of it is because we choose to not see how connected food and violence, like war, is. And they are intimately connected. And arguably, I mean, this is something I want to explore more in my book. Arguably, hunger is a form of violence itself, So by depriving people of a certain community of food, you actually perform a sort of violence on them. And my kind of thinking is it's not just a violence on the body, which of course it is, but it's a cultural violence, a social violence. You take away their emotional lives, the way in which they might have relationships with each other through food.
Yeah. And then it's interesting, you could almost look at that then on a smaller scale. So you've got war, which is kind of that very big scale, but then on a smaller scale, our communities in cities around the UK not having access to foods from their culture, or from, to be able to celebrate their culture, is that form of violence still, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. That is absolutely a form of violence to them, in having to make choices between, say, heating and feeding your child, that is violence, You shouldn't be having to ever make that choice.
I feel like we could talk about this forever. Thank you very much, Dr. Gupta, for sharing your knowledge and experience and your passion as well, because that definitely comes across. And thank you for setting the tone and the discussion that's going to follow at our final creative dinner of series 1. So yeah, thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing where the rest of the conversations go.